All right, ladies and gents, we're almost here at noontime. So, good afternoon. Ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of A Different View. Today is Juneteenth. So, I will say this, happy Juneteenth to those who do celebrate. I know that there are some African Americans, and we're going to get into a whole lot here today, ladies and gents. So just buckle up. It's going to be good. It's going to be informational, and really what I hope will lead to some more understanding to the history, the mystery of Juneteenth, and it'll be really good. So let's dive in. First of all, I was just talking about those who celebrate. So we'll start there. I think we have to understand that everyone has a different reaction. Doesn't take away from the importance of what happened, and in no means. And we'll elaborate on that aspect of it here a little bit later in this episode. But at the same time, people celebrate things in different ways. That's expression. When you talk about church and stuff like that, people celebrate or worship. You look at the definition of worship, deals with how you express your emotions in terms of what you believe in. So I understand those who do not celebrate Juneteenth, and that's fine. And I understand those who do, which that is fine. It is a time to celebrate being held down by another group of people, and by nothing more than a sheer miracle and blessing were we able to escape that per se, as far as from a quote-unquote legal basis, as far as Juneteenth is concerned. The actual recognition of war generals to say that slavery is no more on these lands that has been called the United States. And I'll get into why I'm talking in this way by saying called and different things here in a moment. So I get it. Those who celebrate, again, it is a beautiful day. And even to those who do not, it is still a beautiful day. So I'm going to go back here in time a little bit, because this is literally what we're celebrating is history, as we do with many things. So the Civil War, of course, started in April 12th, 1861, ended May 26th, 1865. And of course, some of these things I'm going to skip here. It's hard to put all of what is titled as Black history, I like to call it African history, in one episode. So I apologize to those who may want me to hit certain topics. Of course, it's not going to be the last episode on things like this. It's as part of a different view, just as every other part of life. So, we will discuss, the goal here is to discuss all different types. It just so happens that today is Juneteenth. So, this is the focus here. So yes, of course, I've not spoken yet on the transatlantic slave trade that happened in the 1500s. To be honest, and we'll get into that here a little bit here, as far as the church's involvement. And again, like I do the Sunday messages here, for those who do not know, I am Christian. But there are a great many things inside Christianity I do not agree with, that I do not actually think are biblical, that I think were man-made to control people. That's the simplest way of putting it. So we will continue to get into that there. So, of course, yes, we're skipping over the transatlantic slave trade, of which Christians did sign off on specifically. I'm calling it a denomination because that's how I see it. I don't look at Catholicism per se as a entity of its own. We all believe in the same God, Holy Spirit, Lord and Savior, Son, Jesus Christ, salvation, damnation, a lot of things here. So, and I understand people, again, and speaking on a different view, people will look at things a certain way. And they view things a certain way. There's a lot of pride, sometimes misplaced, maybe more so than not. But there is a level of pride that goes too far, and I'll get into that here in a second. And then you start to separate from those who are actually part of your own. While separation is necessary to survival in any society, at the same time, you can go too far, which is where the danger lies. So I do consider Catholicism as a denomination, and then therefore, because we are Christian and believe in the same God, to sign off on something as horrible as slavery is of the worst types of things you can do to people. Of course, this is another thing that comes out because of ambiguity, because of being to just be very honest, mystical in how you reveal the evils of humanity. People will kind of divert the responsibilities and push them off into different places when in truth all are responsible. When it comes to the supplanting of another group of people over another, whether we're talking men with women, women with men, parents with kids, kids with parents, all different types of human relationships. So that's something to look at. So after 1865 here, in June 19th, 1865, after the Union had won, and we're going to get into that here in a second, I'll actually preface this by saying the South never lost the Civil War. I think this is going to be hard for a lot of people to hear. A lot of stuff I'm going to say here is going to be hard for people to hear, but I ask that you look up certain things here, study certain things. As I have and I learn, I don't think I am correct on everything. Everyone is able to learn something different, which is really a lot of the foundation of me creating this podcast. So I am not open to information that any of you guys have on the subject of partiality and humanity. I won't even really call it racism because people really don't understand the origin of that word, really, which we'll get into here in a sec as well. So June 19th, 1865, U.S. government, as it was currently constituted at that time, told slave owners to let go of all their slaves that they're free. There's a term out there which is good to study, the Freedmen's Bureau. A lot of black people there that decided they wanted to be free. No more slave to being made to do something and generate wealth for someone else to go out on their own and get their own, which is a very noble thing, and I think is actually the basis for society in general. This is where we need to be, where we should promote one organization or group of people and help them start and get their own. We kind of talked yesterday as far as Father's Day goes, which definitely I encourage y'all to listen to that episode. But the part where you help someone get to a basis so that they can start on their own, and the work involved, all people, that's a call to all people. And as much as as the term goes, black people, because again, black and white were made up terms. There was one part in history, if you look back, we did not reference ourselves as black and white. We were from places where we came from in the planet, which is still true. Whether you were German, Italian, whether you came from Nambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, whether you came from Nigeria, the nation of India, whether it be Pakistan and stuff like that. And shout out to India here for a second. And again, because of ambiguity, a lot of people try to divert from the topic by saying, oh, we all came from Africa. And while there is some basis in that thought process of where all humanity started from, at the same time, we have to be careful to not take away from certain specific topics. It's important to talk on things specifically, just as it's important to talk on things in a totality. And many times both coincide with each other. specifically the way Juneteenth, way all of this mess happened. Two things coincide. But again, shout out to the nation of India for going through the partition. Also, shout out to Marvel Studios and Disney. As much as some different things people feel about both companies, bringing it to light in the last TV show they did on Disney Plus, which was Ms. Marvel. I had no clue about the partition in the 1940s, during the time of the World War II to be exact, where England tried to supplant India, causing religious war to break out. And as a result, we have what we have today, with much division. And as much as India is trying to look to regain union, there was a lot of hurt, and damage caused back in the 40s there during the partition. So that's something to look into here. And I preface all this by talking about words and phrases. It's important to look back to the origin of many of the words and phrases that are used in today's society, because it's caused much confusion, and that's done on purpose. Whenever you want to conquer and divide, which is much of what racism's about, you conquer and divide one group of people in order to take, plain and simple. And that's what a lot of this is all about. One section or sections, maybe select sections. When you get into topics like manifest destiny, certain things along that line that deal with the idea someone else deserves what someone else has. And many of this stuff, they even use the Bible to support their claims, twisting scripture to support their claims, including saying that black skin is a curse, which is horrible. Speaking in terms of Christianity, you cannot say that you love God and hate on certain people. And literally today you have a split in the church where you have two different, while some of it is based under the same denomination, you have two different churches built. You have the AME church, which we'll get into here in a little bit, built back in some origins have it at the 1800s, late 1700s, to escape the discrimination of other Christians from worshiping God. Insane. In a nation where the idea is supposed to be freedom from religious persecution, that the core of it is religious persecution. And that's not something to say to rile up people. It's something or if you're going to be riled up to change. Rile up to helping each other do better, to see past what you've been taught this whole time. Because much of it is wrong, and much of it is done to supplant another, to take over another in order to just basically take from them. So with words and phrases, racism. Let's break down the word racism for a minute, because a lot of people kind of get a little lost here. So discrimination, antagonism, causing someone to do something, which you can look throughout history and see a million different times where, again, not primarily, and I say this, folks, I got to say this because there's a lot of tactics here used to divide. One of them is William Lynch's letter, as it's called, basically. And even though it's not recognized historically, a lot of people prove it to be a hoax. You have to understand that mentally you have to control people in order for their thoughts to lead to certain actions. And that's what you've seen in many riots. Of course, we always re-reference there were many different thriving towns other than Tulsa, Oklahoma. And again, this is a little bit of studying that people have to do here, but you will find there was not just one Black Wall Street. There were many. Again, is from June 19th, 1865, as the descendants of slaves. It's one reason why instead of calling people black, I choose to say those of African descent. Or one that I just heard recently in listening to a message was American Africans. Because what it does is it gives more of a distinction to, because that's the idea, is understanding that while you're part of a conglomerate or a group, you are yourself an individual, and you come from another group of individuals. So it's important to not lose, and again, that's done on purpose. If you get people to kind of all group into one type of thought process, it is very easy for those who did that to take from people, because now you think you're from only one sort of place. You can only go so far, and as a result, you'll never attain what you need to, and others will take that and then attain what you didn't take. It's a tactic in which you can take from people, and it's pretty bad. If when all of this started, if people had more of a mindset of helping another group of people, not taking, if Europe was more concerned about not using the musket, and this was other places that took from Africa, talking about the transatlantic slave trade, it was not just Europe, although Europe is the poster child of this. The same thing also happened with other nations over in the Middle East. This is not to, again, ladies and gents, this is not to cause division, although the truth does divide. These words I am saying, I'm humbly saying to expose the dark. And when you do that, a lot of times it gets very messy, but it's still necessary. It's not something we should shrink away from. It's something that we should run head towards to help bring balance, to help bring change. Life is not lived in balance. It's been thrown off. Well, a lot of these different things that we're talking about here is what's caused it to be this way. And the only way to fix it is to expose the other side of it, to show the other side of it, so that people can make a decision. So antagonism, back to racism here, discrimination, antagonism by an individual, community, or institution. So I looked up the word institution there, because we use certain words and people don't look at the definitions, and it gets lost. The meaning of words gets lost. A society or organization that uses education and certain things toward a similar purpose. So you got institutions out there. Another word on institution is established law or practice. It's another definition of the word. Synonyms too, ladies and gents. It's good to look at other words that describe these words. You get more of a better picture. So individuals, let me go back here. Discrimination, antagonism by individual or community or institution against person or people on the basis of their membership. Membership's kind of silly that they put that word in there. It's not a magazine subscription, but membership or in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically that are marginalized. Now, they had another word in there that had to do with minority. To be honest, I'd like to do away with the word minority, especially when you're speaking in terms of things for black people. If you look at Africa and you look around the world, you have a lot of very dark to very tan people. And we're going to get into interracial, or as I like to call it, intercultural marriage and relationships. That darkness has to come from somewhere. Same as the light. Because you have so many dark people, that has to tell you that in reality, those who have been called the minority are not. But you've got to make people believe that they're the minority in order to take from them. And again, that principle applies to a lot of different things. Today, we call that gaslighting, where a person uses certain terms and phrases and situations to get a person to feeling bad about something, again, so that they can either deny them of something, or in reality what you're doing is taking from a person. And the idea is, again, down here in this life, on this planet, we're supposed to share. I understand that kind of messes with people's types of deals here when it comes to acquiring stuff. And not to say that you should not acquire. We are supposed to own things, but it's not at the cost of other people per se, where you're tilting the scales or creating laws or making situations where it is harder for another person to do something. That's where you throw off the balance. That's where we cause the issue. And there is more than there is billions of acres of land. And I get it. People will start talking about what's habitable and inhabitable and all that kind of thing. But there is more than enough that has been given down here for us all to live peaceably. The issue is those who don't want to live peaceably, where they want to take it for themselves, and they're unapologetic about it. And many of us have heard people who talk like that. So that's racism from that perspective. Racism, though, when you break down the word, an ism is something that describes a specific practice, system, or thought process. The word for thought process is philosophy that we've made up here. So, but the other part of racism is race, which many look at it as, hey, this race of people here in Italy, China, Taiwan, but race actually like a race, a competition. This is a competition based where certain practices and systems are designed to get wealth and acquire it quicker or faster than someone else. And when you look throughout history, you can clearly see how one group of people, or groups of one section of people, have twisted rules and regulations and even use scripture in order to hurt, kill, and take from someone else. The first time that the words used, from what I've seen, and again, if you guys see other info, please shout me out here. It's here to learn. I will post this on my Facebook page here in a moment. So, again, just feel free. I do that on purpose, that we all can kind of talk and see different views on things. So the first time you see this, Oxford Dictionary back in 1902, recorded by a gentleman named Richard Henry Pratt. Now this one's going to be, I read some of this stuff, it's hard to read because it's hard to see the thought process on people dealing with other people, but it's necessary to see in order to get a different view and a full view. So of the topic you're talking about here. So while he was talking out, and it was actually against racism. However, going back to this idea of ambiguity and clouded speak, if you will, double talk is another word we use. While he was talking out against racism, in reality is very a highly discriminatory, antagonistic view of things. So here it goes. Here's, I quote: segregating any class or race of people apart from the rest of the people kills the progress of the segregated people or makes their growth very slow. Association of races and classes is necessary to destroy racism and classism. So that's the first time that you see that phrase. However, re-look at what's being said. When you come to the principle that life is both integrated and segregated, it's not one or the other. People all live inside communities and neighborhoods, yet all live in one city. That is one example of segregation and integration. Kids go to school, go to certain classes, yet they are all part of the same school. You can have a school, K through 6 in very many terms. Now, again, people don't look at it that way, but it is still true. You segregate in order to solidify and establish a certain section of people so that they're able to operate correctly, integrated with more people. And in many times we've foregone one or the other thinking that it is one or the other, when in reality it's both. So when you talk about segregation, of course, back in the 1950s, when you had Jim Crow laws, that type of segregation is not what we're talking about. It's not where all the colored people have to go, which is another horrible term, where the colored people have to go all to one bathroom or one water fountain and all that kind of thing. That was more forced segregation to, again, supplant from someone. So while they were still operating, we've seen the movie Hidden Figures, I believe. Powerful detail and portrayal of what was going on, although we understand that it was very small in actually what was going on, but still to look in and peer and see was necessary. So to see all that was tough. You know, women running, having to go to the bathroom, way into another building somewhere, just horrible things because people thought they could. When in reality, we all pay for the stuff we do, good and bad. We all owe to the piper, as the phrase goes, for the stuff that we're doing to each other. And much you see today is a result of that kind of hate, just absolute greed and hate affecting reality, which I'm going to get into that here in a second. The same man in 1892, Richard Henry Pratt, also said these words, which is rough. All the Indian there is in the race should be dead. How can a person truly believe racism? You have to, so the word twisted, you hear the word twisted a lot, or wicked, deals with twisting and molding something to make something else. Wicker chairs is what people sit in, and wicker furniture, where you twist, material in order to make something to sit in. That's where a lot of that term kind of comes from. And in life, this reality, much of it is wicked, twisted, and solely that someone else can benefit. And it's tough. It's tough to watch. Nobody should be dead because of who they are. No way. Not one place on the planet you come from should you pay the penalty for it. Now, people are going to do it. That doesn't mean that you should. And that's important, because a lot of people, when you're talking about a mental type of thing, much of the mind has been played with here, so people think they're less than, and you're not. You are not less than. You are not less than because you are considered black. You're not less than because you're white. Not less than because you're from the nation of India, or because you're native to these lands here in North America, or wherever you come from. Again, we've allowed ourselves to kind of get deceived here, and we have hurt and hurt ourselves as a society, and will hurt ourselves. Here's another one of these things here. People, and a lot of defenses and barriers that people will say, well, it's going to happen regardless. That is not good enough, ladies and gentlemen. The idea that, people are going to hurt each other, so then really doesn't matter talking about it because people are just going to hurt each other, is not good enough to the part of that is imbalanced, which is the being good to each other. More focus needs to be put on the being good to each other. A lot of times we talk about the news where all you see is bad news. And that's because there's not as much, while there are a lot of articles on the good events humans are doing to each other, more so needs to be done because of how much evil is in the world. To bring balance, you would have to show a lot more good as well. But again, when you talk about media has been controlled by a certain group of people on purpose so that they can push a certain type of thought process into people's minds so they can continue this hate and thereby take from them after they're all dead. One of those things is in and this is not together. Again, the word politic has also been misused. Same as the word lobby when you look it up, just deals with you talking about something you believe in. Of course, lobbying and certain of these things have been twisted. Of course, you throw money at things and all that type of thing, but just at the base terms of the words, just talking about something you believe in. The same muskets that were used to supplant Africa and other nations of the world are the same updated versions of muskets today that people who want to take from us are willing and able to provide to us to take from us. Ladies and gents, that's very, very deep information. But inside of things as holy as defending yourself are people waiting for someone to take that out of balance. They're waiting on people to shun the responsibility of that which they use to defend themselves with arms wide open, to rob a phrase of a song from Creed, to take from people when we're all dead, because they know people will not use proper responsibility with the ability they're given to defend themselves, and they know folks are going to revolt, hurt themselves, and when the masses are gone, they're going to come in and take. We have to be cautious. We have to be aware of the tricks being used here. To talk about something from a Christian perspective, it talks about where we need to be on guard against the adversary that is looking to devour. A lion that's looking to devour. The adversary, I'm mixing verses together, but it all flows together. An adversary of humankind. We have to be careful to that which is greedy and evil around us that means to do us all harm. That's the power of Juneteenth. Is that while it's the freedom for black people to understand that these people were free means I can find my freedom. If a group of a whole nation, whole continent of people can be free from what other continents joined together, other places in another continent joined together to do to one group of people, we can be free. We all can. If you can overcome that, we can be free. That's a powerful, powerful thing, which is why Juneteenth is something that should be celebrated. So to go on with this quote here from Mr. Pratt, one great general had said that the only good Indian is a dead one, and that high sanction of his destruction has been an enormous factor in promoting Indian massacres. In a sense, I agree with the sentiment, but only in this, that all the Indian there is in the race should be dead. Kill the Indian in him and save the man. Ladies and gents, reading that is hard for me to read, not only because my grandmother is Cherokee, but the total give over to the dark, if you will, that you think society is better by eliminating those that make the society is horrible. There's no other way of saying it, which is why people should take a stand against it. You can be respectful. You don't always have to be violent. But I said you don't always have to be violent. People trying to hurt you and stuff like that, you should protect yourself. It's your choice if you don't, but you should protect yourself. And at the end of the day, it's something to take a stand against. Now, I said earlier that the South never lost a civil war. Take this into effect of where this is coming from. In the 1600s, you have basically an invasion. I know we look at it as colonists and everybody came over here to preserve Europe and all that kind of thing. But understand, when you destroy your resources, the solution to that is not to come over and take from someone. One, you should be responsible with the resources you're given. And you see a lot of that today with different things about energy and all this kind of talk that comes up. But again, it's about responsibility with what you've been given, the natural resources of this planet, to deal with them correctly. And when you don't, you have things like what happened in the 1600s, leading from the Middle Ages in the 1200s. That's another thing. A lot of people look at time as just going. Time is, it comes in waves. So when you see laws made at this point, we know now when you talk on presidencies and stuff like that, one presidential group, they got their thing, but it took some time to get to that thing. And then the next president has to leap over that, and then so on and so forth. While a lot of that hopscotch, proverbial hopscotch, is planned, to be honest. Because again, nobody is in the game, if you will, without knowing what game they're playing. Not when you get to that level. When you're talking about a person who's the leader of the free world and stuff like that, you are well aware of the ups, downs, left and rights. So a lot of this is done on purpose here. When they play around with words and terminologies and laws and stuff like that, they're doing it on purpose, which is why we have to be on guard. You know, another thing in Juneteenth that brings out something to light here is how the society, how black people express themselves. Words that we use, terms that we use. People have twisted things like back in the 70s when black people were saying to stay woke. There's many of those different phrases that are out there that people have twisted. Just recently talking about Black Lives Matter. I have to be very frank in saying this. Do all lives matter? Yes. And because they do, my life matters. Black people's lives matter. This is where ambiguity comes in, because now it or kind of too much of an imbalance toward the collective, because when you cannot individualize, come to the defense of the individual or group that is being hurt, how much can you actually say that all lives matter? You would thereby contradict yourself, because you can't truly say that all lives matter if you're not willing to single focus in on these black lives here that are hurting. And yes, that would also go for all life, anyone who is hurting. But many times we use collective speak or speech to take away from everybody, or excuse me, not everybody, single people, so individual groups. So again, to say all lives matter and you can't find it inside your mind and heart to actually truly say and believe that Black lives matter, it's somewhere where there needs to be a search. There needs to be something in the mind where you search and seek more. Again, ladies and gents, I know this is not everybody, and I know that again, all people do not think this way. But it is something that a lot of people do, which is why we're talking about it. So back in the 1600s, you had Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Georgia. They made up the original states, or the original lands, colonies. They used the term back then. That was what they founded. And of course, we know in the 1600s, as far as Jamestown, Virginia, all that kind of thing, and the Pocahontas thing, and all of that, which is something I'll deal with in a different episode down the road here. But realize that was the original. When the South seceded, here's the states that seceded: South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia. Now, these were made, of course, later on after the original ones, but notice some of them that repeat here. So South Carolina and Georgia so far, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina. If places that came from another lost in a war, how can you truly say that that group of people that came from an original group actually lost? I got to say that again, because I'm pretty sure probably there's some people here that didn't catch that. When you have an original group make something, and even though the other part separates from the original group, they're still part of that group. Make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They are still very much so part of the original group. So when the section that takes off from the original group loses, no one wins. And that's the part that people just never connected with this whole thing. There is no winner when you talk about racism. It's losers. It's about the people who lose to support those who quote unquote think they won. And that's the gravity of it when you look at the Civil War, that you had a 4-year war in this country because people could not come to grips with how to have an economy without making it off the backs of people. Just not being able to share is what that comes down to. Not even the hate for another culture, even though that's a thing. Literally how to make money, how to survive after you waste money and waste resources. Because again, when England came over, and they were not the only ones, the French Indian War that happened a little bit before that, before the Civil War, and right around the time when they first took over around here and everything like that, you have to understand that was softening the blow. You had France and Britain fighting over the land that was already here. Just go back and relook at the French Indian War's events. That's literally what is told. The people really do have to understand the plan. For you to have something this intricate as we have today that holds back so many people, you have to understand that one group of people took from another group of people. And they did it on purpose. They did it on purpose to take. Sorry about that, ladies and gents. That's life there happening right while we're talking. That'd be my little girl, my dog Fiona there, being protecting. So I apologize about that. But back at the topic at hand, yes, this is about taking. This is about acquisitions, land, resources, money, forms of travel, all types of stuff, just not sharing. So that's just something to be aware of. I much like when, instead of using the words race, I like using ethnic, which comes, I found out, from the Greek word ethnos, just talking about people, where you come from is pretty big. So, let's dive into this here. What has racism affected? Everything. A lot of people do not realize it, but literally racism, this race to acquire everything, has affected everything. I'll start off with relationships. This one was tough for me to when I found this out, but it is the truth. Even down to who you love, many times we do not realize it. It is affected by racism. You've got people who just make decisions and marry solely because it's better to stay inside one culture than to risk being hurt by another. Now, I've got to preface this by saying this. Not all people think that way. Folks just love each other, as love has been designed to be, for people to love each other. It's got nothing to do with anything more than the light inside one person talking to the light inside another person. That is it. That is it, as it was designed to be. And again, I've told y'all before, I'm Christian, so you may hear certain Christian terms come out. I do apologize to those who are not, but thank God it's that way, because we need to have just a renewal of the mind, if you will, in when it comes to loving people. Arranged marriages that has happened in history, even down to how young you are, very young people getting married that may have not seen the totality of life to understand the gravity of marriage. Just all kinds of things. People have picked their lovers, their spouses from the wrong criteria. And yes, you have interracial marriage, intercultural marriage. Side note on that, and of course the classic court case, Loving versus Virginia, where a black woman's married to a white man. They actually spent a year in jail to talk to the point of things that are taken from people. Love. You would actually try to control people who love people by saying the following: you've got to go to jail because as a black woman, you married a white man. That is the most insane type of thinking, and it passes down. You know, a lot of people talk about whether something's genetically done with this thing or whether it's learned. 100% it is learned. I am fully convinced of this truth, that in order for you to truly, because of how powerful love is, the entity that is love, that humans have barely scratched the surface on, and that's all of us. At the same time, you have got to understand that love doesn't have the kind of boundaries you think it does, or the kind of boundaries we think it does. You know, the truth is that, as the phrase goes, that evil prevails when good men and women do nothing. And in the case of this court case, standing up for the right to love the person you want, that you're drawn to, you understand, like that is so very important. Not being able to marry in other cultures has been around since about the 1600s, from certain studies that I've seen. And of course, we know that nothing happens right at the time that you find that out. So it's probably before that. Made legal in June 12th, excuse me. So we're just celebrating June's a month, man. Let me tell you. So June 12th, 1967 was when intercultural. So all the way from the 1600s to 1967 was when we saw intercultural relationships not be having to be hidden behind the scenes, where it's up close and it's intimate and it's personal, and it shows the love between two people willing to take on this life and all its ills and all its successes. That's the part that's powerful about it. So that's one thing that racism has affected. Education, of course, we know, as you study back into slavery, how black people were not allowed to learn, were not allowed to read. They're not again, while I'm specifically speaking about black people, they're not the only ones. You have a lot of people who are unlearned, who are of different cultures, because it was held back from them. Much like you have with women not being allowed to vote, black people not being allowed to vote. Many things just taking from people. And this whole thing now today is that the goal here is to give back. It's to give back. I know it's tough. I know it's hard. We have to band together to give back. Religion, and this is where this one gets kind of tough. Literally, you have the creation of two different types of churches, if you will, because of racism, because Christians would not allow the freed black people at the time to worship with them. They had to make their own denomination. Today, what it is called is I believe it's the American Methodist Episcopalian Church, I believe. The AME Church. That's what most people know it as. You literally have you can go back and look at the history of it. You literally have a whole group of people worshiping God because of the response of other Christians not wanting them to worship God with them. The stuff like this is heartbreaking. Because we're all people. You know, the Bible talks about how from one blood all of the nations were made. Again, this is all stuff that you can Google and look up and read. How in the world could a God that good to create us all then want certain sections to separate from themselves because the other ones think they're inferior? This comes down to a thing of accepting of the truth, excuse me. Many words are made up, ladies and gents. At one point, you look at many of the words we speak today, they weren't there. Someone else, there another term or another phrase was used, and then they just decided to either shorten it down, all that kind of thing, which is why when it comes to certain things like conservative or liberal, there's a great many of these terms that are catchphrases we use today. They hide the truth of a person and of a thought process. And no one, because a person thinks that gun control shouldn't have as many regulations as it doesn't make them conservative. It makes them a person who thinks gun control should not have that many regulations, and vice versa. Same thing on healthcare. People who think that women should be able to have an abortion does not make them liberal. It makes them people who think women should not have an abortion. Many times we should be able to have abortions. Many times we put too many terms on things instead of speaking clearly exactly what it is. Maybe for use of less words, all that kind of thing. So those are things really to take into account here. Things like healthcare, home ownership, car ownership, all different things racism has affected. You look up terms like redlining. You look up terms like gentrification. You start looking all across the board. Unfortunately, this evil has touched everything. So that's just some things. It's just a renewing of the mind. I didn't realize this actually until today, and many of this, and that's why I say reach out when you find different things. I didn't realize this until today, that there is an index. It's actually called Index Librorum Prohibitorium, which is an index for a list of prohibited books. And back from about 1573 to 1826. There were books written against slavery that were put in this banned list. This is from the Catholic Church. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not just blaming the Catholic Church here, because we all have a hand in this. But the importance of what I'm bringing out here is to use something as holy as what people believe in to enslave people. That's tough. That's tough. Solely for whatever you could gain, whatever money or whatever comes back from you supporting stuff like that. It is never ever enough to go against the laws of goodness and decency in this earth. And the choice people make to keep doing it is what is causing the issues here. You will always have issues, don't get me wrong. But we're talking about eliminating the excess ones that literally till today you have in its history. While we need policing, because people are nuts today, they've always been nuts. You need someone to be able to execute laws, but not at the cost of the people. And and people will use the term fine line. There is a line there. Sometimes it's not as fine as what you think it is. Sometimes it's very broad. It's very right there in the open. And people just need to act on it instead of trying not to act on it. We need to start making excuses to do better than making excuses to stay the same or be worse. And that's a lot what you find today. And as soon as we get over that, you'll see a lot of marked improvement. Again, it may not look the best, may not always be perfect, but it will be better than where we're at now. That's what I got, ladies and gents. That's what I got. I hope you guys take in a lot of what I said. Look up a lot of the stuff that I was talking about today. Do your own studies. Too many times we rely on someone else to tell us stuff instead of us looking up and studying on our own to gain our own knowledge and perspective on these things. And I believe it'll make us better as a people for it. So thank you guys for joining me on this episode here of Different View, and even listening in on my dog. And as always, ladies and gents, find the beauty in a different view.